FNAF, aka Five Nights at Freddy's, is a point-and-click horror game developed by Scott Cawthon and released on August 8th, 2014. I became a fan of the series shortly after the release of the first game, and for the 10th anniversary, I want to take a look back at the series that I grew up with, from the 2nd to 3rd grade, all the way to high school. Before I want to go into the game itself, I want to talk about what inspired Scott to make FNAF 1. You see, up until the release of the first game, Scott made a ton of indie games. In fact, he made a total of 80 before the release of FNAF 1. However, the most important of which is Chipper & Sons Lumber Company. The most common criticism that Chipper & Sons got was that the characters looked, end quote, like scary animatronic animals. Scott was understandably saddened by hearing this. However, he decided to make a game about scary animatronic animals. That game, of course, being the now famous Five Nights at Freddy's. The story of FNAF 1 is about you, the player, Michael Schmidt, defending yourself from 5 animatronics. Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, Foxy the Pirate, and Golden Freddy. The only way to defend yourself in this game is by closing the doors on the animatronics. And that's really all the gameplay there is. The only gameplay, like I said before, is the closing of the doors and checking the cameras. FNAF 1 is an incredibly simple game. That begs the question though, if FNAF 1 is such a simple game, why did it get so popular in the first place? That's incredibly simple. FNAF 1, even back then, is an incredibly scary game. Scott really knew what he was doing whenever he was making it. Not only that, but FNAF 1 was a extremely, standout game in the genre. At the time, 90% of horror games had you moving around with the threats, and while games like Outlast is in fact really scary, FNAF 1 just stuck out more since you couldn't move, and it made the game feel a lot scarier than something like Outlast, in my opinion. I think FNAF 1 has the best looking animatronics out of any game in the series. While yes, characters like Glamrock Freddy, for example, look better looking, I think the original crew, outside of nostalgia, are the best designed, as they look like they could be genuine animatronics made to entertain children that they would like, but whenever they're in the dark, they also look like they could be genuinely terrifying. FNAF 1 has a lot of great renders. My 2 favorite renders are of Bonnie at the back of the left hallway, whenever he's just standing there and then there's the flickering light covering him. And the second is Bonnie in the parts and service, where he's just really close up to the cameras. Instead of having his eyes, he just has 2 pinpoint pricks. I also want to talk about how great the sound design is. The only sound you consistently hear is the loud fuzzing of the fan, which makes you feel immersed. And then whenever you scan a door and then the animatronics are there with that loud ass sting, it is genuinely really good use of sound design. Although I'd recommend you go check out other videos about how good the sound design is, because they could just explain things in ways that I can't even begin to imagine. My favorite character in the original Five Nights at Freddy's has to be Freddy Fazbear. I know it's a bit of a generic answer, but what other character can I pick? Freddy hiding in the cameras with the only way to tell where he is most of the time, outside of just 2 dots that are hidden in the static, is really cool, and it's something I wish not just official games but fan games would do more often. And then the initial shock of him leaving at night 3, if you don't know how he works, is also really scary. I know what the worst part of FNAF 1 is though? The nights. The nights take 9 whole minutes just to end. That is awful. It's almost as bad as Pop Goes, which take 10 minutes. That time alone makes, to me at least, games like Pop Goes in the original FNAF unplayable after you beat it the first time. I do think, though, that after night 3, so nights 4, 5, and 6, the 9-minute is a bit better, as those are a lot more active, because they're a lot on higher AI, so it's going to be harder to deal with them. So it's a bit better, but it shouldn't be 9 minutes. In my opinion, the golden night for a FNAF fan game and official is 6 minutes long. Something that irritates me is when people say FNAF 1 is just a jump scare game, that's where the horror is. While yes, the jump scares do get me, I think the jump scares act more as a cutoff from the horror built from the tension, not as the boom, you're scared, which I think actually puts it above a lot of other games and movies with jump scares, where the jump scares act as the primary sense of horror with zero build-up. I think the Easter eggs also heavily contribute to the sense of horror, like the posters changing and the "it's me" flashing on screen. I genuinely got scared whenever those things popped up. FNAF 1, even back then, was a very influential game. If it hadn't been released and been so successful, games like Poppy Playtime and Gardner Banban would probably not exist. Speaking of Gardner Banban, and Poppy Playtime as well, those are games that are called mascot horror. In my opinion, FNAF 1 and the rest of the series popularized mascot horror. Yeah, this game absolutely blew up, and I'm happy that it did, not just because I've been entertained by the series and have been a fan for a decade now, but it launched the careers of a lot of people. Markiplier, Game Theory, Jacksepticeye, Dawko, CoreX, Genshin, and CG5, just to name a few. I just want to add on, it is genuinely crazy to me that this game is 10 years old. It really does feel like it went by in a flash. That's all for this video. I'll hopefully have a new one out by the end of the month. I do want to take a bit slower so I could have actual editing